Hello everyone, this is Amity Sensei. Today I want to show you how to draw this realistic ribbon art on the iPad. We'll be using the app Procreate to do it. The brush tool we'll be using is brand new too. For anyone who wants to join in, I'll put the link to it in the description down below. It'd be great if you download it and follow along. This tutorial is meant more for intermediate users, so it's a bit on the difficult side, but if you can do it, it really helps you to remember some of Procreate's tricky features, and you can master making some realistic ribbon art, so please give it a try if you can. Once we've opened up Procreate, we are going to start with the plus button at the top right. This time we are going to press this black box button at the top and specify the canvas size. We'll be going with 1800 x 1700 today. Once you've downloaded the brush, make sure you can find a brush set labeled Apogee Winter set in your brush menu. There is a brush called Ribbon Brush, which is the one we are going to be using today. It lets us draw 3 ribbon shapes really easily. There are also a number of other brushes here in the winter set, such as ink brushes, this heart brush, and Christmas tree brushes. There are also brushes for snow and other sorts of textures, 16 in total. I'll be talking about them in a future video, but for now I'll focus on how to draw realistic ribbons, so let's pick the ribbon brush. Now we will draw the letters. The brush doesn't have to be too thick, so something like this should be fine. With this, we are going to write Merry Christmas in cursive. I'm sure there are people who struggle with cursive writing, but if you look up how to draw cursive online, there are a lot of results, so try looking at those while you practice to get a hang of it. The trick is not to try and do it all at once. You can try again and again. There's also the Move tool, which is the blue highlighted arrow up here. This lets you change the size and move the writing around afterwards, so you can keep on tweaking it after you're finished writing as much as you want. I just finished writing Merry here, and then I move it up a bit. After this, I'm just going to write Christmas below it. As you can see, I'm always writing and erasing over and over. I cut a lot of the footage so you can't see it here, but I'm always writing and rewriting. So don't feel like you have to do it all in one go. So try as many times as you like challenging yourself. Now once we have the words all finished, we're going to press the arrow button on the top left and move them around. Try making it so that they are roughly in the middle. This is where it gets really hard. You'll be fun at the end, but for now we're going to add the highlights and shadows that really make it look realistic. First, make a new layer at the very top in the layer panel. Then if you press layer 2 here, a button labeled Clip Mask appears. Press that to turn it on. After that, this tiny little arrow mark should show up on the left side, so make sure that it does. After this, we press the End button on the right side here and choose the multiplication option at the very top. It's represented by the letter M. In the Image Mode section, we choose multiplication. Now we move on to the shadows. We'll be using the mid-level brush in the default brush category. For the color, we'll go with the darkish red. Then we'll make sure we've selected layer 2 in the layer panel and start drawing our shadows. I just drew a little here. You can see it doesn't stick out too much. This is because we turned mask clipping on before. If we turn it off, it comes out of the lines and leaks out. As we put mask clipping on, we can fill in the shadows without the colors bleeding out. So that's all about mask clipping. Make sure you have it on. So let's start drawing our shadows. How do we do it? Well, for these overlapping parts, it's pretty much as you'd expect. Where the ribbons overlap, you decide which is in front and which is behind, and put the shadows where the ribbon is behind another one, like this. I've only put a little bit, but you can already tell it's looking pretty realistic. Try to make it so it fades out or thickens gradually. For example, with this bottom part here that's curving, make sure to draw the shadows so that it's clear. Refer to a picture of real ribbons as you do it. That way it comes out really looking like a ribbon. The trick is to make the curvy parts the darkest and then have the shadows fade from there. You also have to keep the lighting in mind. This is super important. Right now I have the light coming from the top right and the shadows coming from the bottom left. Make sure you're picturing where the light is hitting the ribbons from, as well as where the brightest and darkest parts are while you're drawing. If the light and shadows don't match, it comes out looking really strange, like it's real but something is off. The light is coming from the top right and the shadows fall on the bottom left, so be sure to always keep this in mind while you're drawing your shadows. In Procreate, there's something called the blur tool. It's the fingerprint in the top right tool panel. You can use this on the parts with shadows that are too thick to smooth and blur them out. It helps a lot to use it while drawing. So I can switch between them quickly, I actually leave little buttons for each of the three colors somewhere on the screen while I draw. Then I use the eyedropper tool, which is the middle button on the bar on the left side. It lets me choose the color I need, change between them, and keep drawing. It's also important to draw the borders of the ribbons purpley. You can usually use the middle of a blur tool, but for these border parts, you want to purpley draw these lines very dark where you find the ribbons curve. I also draw them the strongest there, and then have them fade out. And now you're finished with the shadows. It's very important to take your time and do it properly, but I'm short on time here, so I just did it quickly. If you turn off the layer, you can see the difference really clearly. By zooming in, you can see that the shadows really bring that depth and realism to it. This is where we put in the highlights and make it even more realistic. Let's get started. First, make another new layer at the very top. Just like this, we are going to tap this and turn on mask clipping. Then the arrow mark pops up. Next, we press the N button, and instead of multiplication like last time, we're going with the screen option. That's the letter S for screen. This makes what we draw a little bit brighter. With screen enable, we are using the mid-level brush like before, with a light pink color. Now we are going to draw our highlights. With the light coming from the top right like before, we find what should be the brightest part and adding our light right there. Be sure not to do too much. We made the shadows big and blurry, but for the light we want to be very precise, like this. Wherever you feel like the light would hit, you're going to add the light in precisely. When I'm doing the highlights, I put them strongly up first, and then use the blur tool and the eraser to touch it up afterwards. It looks a bit gaudy if the light is too strong, but you can do it strong up first and then blur it or erase it as you go. I know I've said it a lot, but please keep in mind that the light is coming from the top right. As you practice again and again, you will gradually become better at drawing while picturing light when you are drawing in a realistic style. It's the interaction between the light and the shadows that creates this realistic effect, but a lot of people can't really get the balance right, so practicing like this really helps. This ribbon art is especially helpful for that, so please give it a try. And now we're done with the highlights too. When we try turning them off, you can see we might have made them too strong, but we'll just learn from it for next time. Now that we have both the highlights and the shadows done, it's time to move on to the background. For the background, we are going to use a photo. I have a bunch of these texture-like pictures saved in my camera roll. We are going to open it with slide over and drag that picture. Just touch, hold, and move it into the window to insert it into Procreate. First, we are going to position the texture where we want it and play with the size a little. If you look up texture in the image search online, a lot of these sorts of images will show up, so please take a look. Once we have the layer position, we are going to move the texture layer all the way to the bottom. It's a little dark right now, so we press the N button and use the opacity slider to reduce the opacity. It's really up to you to decide how you want to do it, but I'm going to make the color a bit weaker. We are now going to add a bit of light to this layer, so please pick soft brush. We'll be using a white color here. Now we go back to the layer panel, press N, and choose overlay for our picture mode. It's near the bottom. With overlay, we can choose white to make the background colors brighter and choose black to make the colors darker or thicker. For example, if I pick black and shade in the edges, you can see the colors get darker. But it's not just black, it actually makes the colors in the background darker. Then if you use white, these colors become lighter. With this, we are going to make the center lighter and the edges darker, or a vignette type feel. Finally, and this is really important, we have the ribbon shadows. So we swipe right on our very first ribbon layer and choose copy. Now we have two of the same layer. We're going to choose the bottom one and choose saturation, opacity, and brightness in the adjustment panel on the top left and then pick layer. Then we make it darker. When you use the brightness panel to make it darker, it becomes the shadows. If we display our other ribbon layer, the shadow layer is kind of hidden, so we're going to move it. To do this, we use the move tool at the top left and we move it with our Apple Pencil. Like this. Move it so slightly down and to the left. I will say this again, the light is coming from the top right, so the shadows fall to the bottom left. So just shifting it slightly is enough. After you move it, go to the adjustment panel on the top left and pick this blur option here. Specifically, pick the layer button on the blur. With this option enabled, if I slide left and right with my Apple Pencil, can you tell that the shadows underneath are kind of blurring? If you overdo it, it gets too dark, but we're just going to do it slightly. After that, it really starts to look super realistic. So put the shadows in just like that. And if you overdid it, you can use the opacity slider in the layer panel to make it lighter and more natural. If you want, you can also add in some extra shadows in specific areas so that they look more realistic. But you don't have to do it, it already looks good. And now we're finished. Let's quickly take a look at the layer panel. We have the background layer at the bottom, and then the highlights and shadows of the background. Then we have the ribbon shadows. Above that, we have the base ribbon design and the shadows and highlights for that. When it comes to the shadows and highlights, the more accurately you draw this, the more realistic the picture becomes. I didn't have a lot of time, so I did it all in 40 minutes. But if you have more time, try blurring the highlights and adding the shadows in more carefully. And there you have it, this is the end of the tutorial. It's a bit difficult, but it's great practice for writing cursive letters and understanding lighting. It also helps you to remember all the tricky features in Procreate, like mask clipping, blurring, and copying. So please remember them, and there's also all sorts of designs you can do like these. If you look up ribbon design, a ton of these will come up, so you should use one as a reference while you're drawing. Now a little bit about the brush we used today. I'll put the link to the Amity Winter set in the description down below, so please download it from there. It's not just the ribbon brush we used today, there's also star brushes, Christmas tree brushes, and snow brushes. There are 16 brushes in total, and there's so many ways to use them, and I'll show you how in my later videos, so please look forward to them. That's it for today. If you like this video, please hit the like button down below. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I make videos on tips and hacks of iPad, so please do that too. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!